Hello, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. Welcome back for Hausfrau Friday. You may have noticed in some of my videos that I am wearing a little bit of kind of history-bounding clothes. If you aren't familiar with history-bounding, it is the kind of low-key cosplay that folks do where they wear some element of historical costuming in their daily wear. It started off with Disney bounding as a kind of trend. You can Google that if you want, and then proceeded to expand into what is known as history bounding. I believe there is a sewist named Morgan Donner who coined that phrase. So when you are history bounding, perhaps you're wearing a full, carefully, accurately reconstructed historical garment. Perhaps you're just wearing something with a little element of historical fashion in it. I have always really liked sewing my own clothes. I have several videos on sewing. And sewing clothes for my kids. And I've always really enjoyed historical costumery, but it's not really been until the pandemic that I understood what history bounding was and got into it more and more. I kind of had a little bit of a cottage garden aesthetic way back since my early 20s. I loved long skirts. I've said before, I'm a huge fan of Tasha Tudor. Before cottagecore was a thing, oh gosh, I sound old, I'm 43, so I'm gonna sound like before cottagecore was fashionable, I was a cottagecore OG, but it's kind of true. I really love to wear aprons. I love to wear linen and wool, and I love to knit, and I love to weave. So that sort of lends itself to traditional garments, right? Because we're working with natural fibers, we're kind of hearkening back to that kind of pastoral imagery. So it makes sense if you are interested in kind of traditional handcrafts, if those appeal to you, traditional homemaking skills, that might spill over into history bounding a little bit, because you're exploring those traditional skills. You're exploring things that our foremothers knew how to do. And so it becomes a natural segue into, well, what did they wear and why did they wear it? And what were the useful elements of their wardrobes, and also the beautiful parts of their wardrobes? And maybe I want to reclaim those a little bit. I love history bounding clothes because they are kind of timeless, and you can just chuck whatever fashion trend is going on. Another thing that's great about being in your 40s is you don't really care what anybody thinks about what you're wearing, and you can just wear whatever you want. So I have a lot of like bodices that I love to sew because I can sew them by hand and they can use small amounts of fabric. So I sew a lot of those. But I finally went and made a chemise, and that's what I'm wearing here. It is kind of a linen slip, and I sewed it all by hand except the hem on the bottom and then the tube where I put in the drawstring. I did those by machine because I wanted them to be extra heavy duty, especially because the drawstring gets pulled a lot. So chemise is a linen or cotton undergarment, and there are many, many, many styles. And Mariah Patty has a wonderful video. If you would like to check out how to design your own chemise, I highly recommend her tutorial. She loves to talk about, I highly recommend her tutorial. She loves to talk about mathematics a lot and geometry, and how math and sewing intermingle. And so I find it really, really interesting. So she gives you the tools for how to design your own garment. And I'm really happy with how mine turned out. So I've been thinking a lot more about, like, what are historical undergarments? What do I get out of wearing them? I really enjoy wearing linen clothes. This, by the way, cost me $14 to make the linen, and I have enough linen left over to make like a half slip or perhaps a blouse for one of my daughters out of it. I have a video on where I ordered this linen. It's a very, very lightweight summer quality linen that I probably couldn't wear without something over it, but is very, very light and breathable. One of the things I love about history bounding is the ability to tap into dressing ourselves in natural fibers. And as a permaculturist and someone who's interested in sustainable living and resilient living, I want to be able to compost my clothes when I'm done with them. I don't want to produce microplastic pollution. So for me, this was a great sewing project. It's very simple, uses very simple geometry. If you're interested in tackling that first element of history bounding, how can I add something historical to my wardrobe? You might check out making a chemise, also called a shift. Very, very easy. It uses a little bit of linen, and you can really do it with very simple sewing skills, either by hand or on the machine. And it's something that at the end of its life you can compost. You could wear it as a nightgown. It works very well as a nightgown. I really like it as an alternative to a blouse. So I'm wearing a skirt that I made. I have an apron on. I'm wearing a skirt that I made. The chemise goes down about to my knees, and then it tucks into the skirt, and I love that it can't come untucked because it's so much longer than a regular blouse. But then I can just wear a vest over it, and then boom, I'm dressed for the day, right? But I could also just wear it underneath as a base layer on a colder day and wear something over it that, you know, the chemise protects perhaps a wool garment from sweat and from being next to your body. It protects that kind of overgarment.
When you wear a chemise between your skin and an outer garment, you preserve the life and longevity of that garment because you don't have to wash it as often since it is not in direct contact with the skin. So wearing a chemise is a step toward more sustainable fashion.
So there's a lot of useful things to thinking about history bounding and wearing historical elements in your wardrobe. I think it really ties in well with wanting to be an ecological homemaker. The more you go down that rabbit hole of sustainable fashion, the more you kind of tap into historical fashion, because the options in days gone by were only natural fibers, were only things where you had to work with the things that could be turned back to the earth, fibers that could be turned back into the earth when you're done with them. And also the designs back then were such that they had to be functional. The average woman was a working woman, right? A homemaker is a working person who uses their body. And so when you research those historical working garments, you find that they actually work really well in the course of your daily work as a homemaker. And also add like a little bit of whimsy, right? Add like a little touch of beauty, something where I feel like I'm kind of secretly dressing up a little bit, and perhaps nobody knows, perhaps everybody knows and says, what are you wearing? I will mention that when I go and visit my dad at assisted living, that all the little old ladies comment on my outfits. I love dressing up for them. My dad doesn't care what I wear, but I love dressing up because every time I go in, 3 or 4 or 5 women will come and say, oh my gosh, I love your outfit. Oh, that reminds me of something that I wore in the 50s, or that reminds me of something that my mother wore, or that reminds me of, you know, the traditional cultural dress where my family is from in Europe. And so I love dressing up so that I can bring a little bit of joy to their day. I really get a kick out of that. But also, if nobody notices, I'm wearing something that's comfortable, functional, ecological. I can compost it when I'm done, but I feel underneath like I'm getting like a little bit of a rush of like I'm wearing something a little bit special, something a little bit history boundy, something that connects me with my foremothers, and something that even if nobody else notices it, I feel a little bit more special and beautiful in my day as a result. So I'm going to drop some links down in the description for some great resources on sewing shifts and chemises, and also just history bounding in general, because I think it's something that you don't have to be young to embrace it. You can be in your 40s like me. It's not something just for the 20-somethings. My 2 teenage daughters are really into having very subtle elements of history bounding in their wardrobes. But also, it's something that perhaps can kind of spice up your simple day, give you a new craft, a new hobby to tap into, build those sewing skills, and make you feel a little bit special, even in the course of perhaps mundane housework that we all have to do. So thanks for watching Hausfrau Friday. I will be back with a skill-based video next week. Check out my Patreon down below, and all of the links I'm going to drop down in the description. I'll be back soon. Bye.